Welcome to our 2023 Academic Indicator presentation from the Accountability, Development, and Policy Analysis Unit here at the California Department of Education. My name is Katrina Gonzalez, and I will be co-presenting with Michael Ishimoto. Today's session will be covering an in-depth review of the academic indicator, and then we'll cover a few reminders about the dashboard in general. For the 2023 dashboard, the California Department of Education is releasing a series of on-demand sessions, which will be short, accessible videos, which can be accessed anytime and will cover each of the state indicators in more detail, plus other accountability information. Today's agenda includes an overview of the California School Dashboard, which we'll refer to as the dashboard from here on out. Next, we will cover all things academic indicator, including current and potential measures, followed by some important review of the participation rate, a few frequently asked questions, general rules about the dashboard, and finally, how to go about contacting or reaching us with any and all of your dashboard questions. First, we will start with an overview of the dashboard. The California Dashboard is an online tool designed to help communities across the state access important information about kindergarten through grade 12. The dashboard reports how districts and schools are performing on multiple state and local measures to make up California's accountability system. A big question that may be on your mind is, what can I expect from the 2023 dashboard? Thankfully, 2022 was a big year of changes, and 2023 will be different, but most of it will all be pretty familiar. The dashboard will still report local indicators and state indicators. The big change will be in that state measures will return to colors. In 2023, the dashboard will display performance through 6 state measures. They are the academic indicators, which include measures for both English Language Arts and Literacy, or ELA, and mathematics, English Learner Progress Indicator, the Chronic Absenteeism Indicator, Graduation Rate Indicator, Suspension Rate Indicator, and the College/Career Indicator. The College/Career measure is reported as a status-only indicator on the 2023 dashboard. For our next topic, I'll turn it over to Michael to talk about the specifics of the academic indicator. Michael?
Thank you, Katrina. The overview of the dashboard gives us a great introduction to the more specific rules and steps for calculating the measures of the academic indicator. So let's begin. First, we'll provide a general overview of how we measure performance and assign colors. The measure of performance for LEAs, schools, and student groups on the dashboard is done by looking at 2 years of data. Current year data equals status. A comparison between the current and prior year data equals change. It's the combination of status and change that determines color performance on the dashboard, and is designed by receiving one of 5 colors: red, orange, yellow, green, or blue, with red at the lowest performance level to blue at the highest performance level. So what are the academic indicators? The academic indicators contain 2 measures: English Language Arts and mathematics. They are based on the student performance on the Smarter Balanced Summative Assessments and the California Alternative Assessments, or CAAs. These are the summative assessments that are administered every spring in grades 3 through 8 and grade 11. These assessments show how well students are meeting grade level standards. Student scores are only included in the academic indicators if the student is continuously enrolled. But what is continuous enrollment exactly? We use a lot of terms in accountability around enrollment, so let's clarify what we mean here. Cumulative enrollment is enrollment at any time during the year. Continuous enrollment is defined as enrollment from Fall Census Day, or the first Wednesday in October, to the time of testing without a gap in enrollment of more than 30 consecutive calendar days. If a student has a gap in enrollment of 45 consecutive days in the middle of the year, their assessment scores would not be included in the academic indicator. Keep in mind that does not mean that they are not expected to test. We'll get into the participation rate and expectations to test a little later in the presentation. Since the academic indicator is a little different from the other indicators, and isn't self-reported, many people want to know, where do the data come from? The Smarter Balanced Summative Assessment and the California Alternative Assessment results are received from the testing vendor, in this case, the Educational Testing Service, or ETS. We also extract data from the California Longitudinal Pupil Achievement Data System, also known as CalPADS, to assist in our calculations. Specifically, we look at demographic data, which is used to make student group determinations, enrollment data, which is used to determine which students are included in the participation rate, and enrollment data, which is used to determine continuous enrollment to calculate the distance from standard, or DFS. As the dashboard returns to colors in 2023, we want to make sure we cover what you will see in the academic indicators on the dashboard. A baseball card style graphic will be the first level of information available to schools and LEAs related to the academic indicator. This particular card is an English Language Arts performance card, which reports results from the ELA assessment, summative assessments. The gauge shows 5 different performance levels on the baseball card: red, orange, yellow, green, and blue. This card is showing a green performance level, or color, with the gauge pointing to the green section and the word green under the gauge. Below that, we see the reporting for status and change. In this example, the entity's status shows a distance from standard in the current year that is 2.5 points below standard. It shows the change from the prior year as an increase in 3.7 points. Finally, at the bottom of the card, the equity report shares the number of student groups in each performance level or color. In this example, there are 0 student groups in red, 4 in orange, 5 in yellow, 2 in green, and 2 in blue. There is a link to view more details at the base of the card, which provides more specific student group information. You will find similar information on the math academic indicator cards, except they will contain information for math scores. Additional information is displayed for the academic indicators within the additional student group report. As we covered in the last slide, the View More Details link provides more specific student group data. The distance from standard is also reported for a few extra student groups. These are reported for informational purposes only, and they are not included or used in state or federal support determinations. No color performance level is assigned. However, the status and change from the prior year and the number of students are reported. These additional student group reports are available for currently English learners, or EL, reclassified English learners, and English only. In the examples provided, the current English learners had a status of 106.7 points below standard, maintain a certain number of points, and the number of students are listed. For reclassified English learners who have reclassified in the past 4 years, the status was 27.3 points below standard. Change shows that they maintained a number of points, and the number of students is also shown. The English-only group scored 22.7 points below standard, and again, the data for change in the number of students is shown. Current English learners, also referred to as EL, are only those students who are classified as EL in CalPADS. It does not include any of the students who have been reclassified. The reclassified English learners include students who have been reclassified for up to 4 years. And English only are students who are not classified as either EL or reclassified EL. We have mentioned distance from standard in the past few slides, but let's back up a bit and find out what distance from standard, or DFS. The DFS is used to determine the status for ELA in math. It is the distance between a student score on the Smarter Balanced summative assessments and the threshold for the standard met achievement level. In other words, it is the distance between the student score and the lowest threshold scale score for level 3. The scale score ranges for the Smarter Balanced summative assessments vary by both content area, ELA in mathematics, and by grade level. The scale score levels, and ranges for each group can be found on the California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress, or CASP website, which can be accessed through the note-taking guide. Now that we know what DFS is, how can it be calculated? It's best to explain the calculation in 3 simple steps. Step 1 is to calculate the DFS for each student. As I mentioned earlier, this means referencing the student's scale score and measuring the distance to the bottom of level 3 for their grade, level, and subject. Next, in step 2, we calculate the average DFS for a school or district using students' DFS values. The average DFS will be used to determine the status level for a school, district, or student group. Step 3 is to calculate the change based on the difference in DFS from the year prior. The average DFS and the change from the prior year for each assessment is used to determine the performance level or color. But what about those students who take the California Alternative Assessment, also known as CAA? How do we calculate their DFS? For the CAA scores, a crosswalk was created to convert levels of the CAA to correspond with levels on the Smarter Balanced Summative Assessments using a top of the scale range approach. For levels 1 through 3 on the CAA, a student's score would be substituted with the top score point of the same Smarter Balanced achievement level. All CAA assessments results will be converted to one of the 3 scale scores for each grade in each content area. So as an example, if a CAA score is in level 2 for ELA, their Smarter Balance score would be the top score for level 2 for ELA. There is a link in your note-taking guide to the levels and ranges for each grade on the CAA to aid in the conversion. This newly converted Smarter Balanced summative assessment score will be used to calculate the DFS for those students taking the CAA. Now I will provide details on how performance colors are determined using a 5x5 table. LEA school and student group performance levels is determined through the use of a 5x5 table that utilizes the status and change levels. The academic indicator 5x5 looks a little different than the other indicators, but still uses the intersection of status and change to determine the final performance level or color. The 5x5 table shows performance level with the top row representing the change from the prior year. The possible change levels are declined significantly, declined, maintained, increased, and increased significantly. The first column shows status indicating performance in the current year. Status levels include very high, high, medium, low, and very low. The intersection of change in status will give the performance level or color. In this example, academic 5x5 chart, in order to receive a blue performance level, an LEA school or student group would need one of the following combinations: status of very high and a change level of either maintained, increased, or increased significantly, or a status level of high and a change level of increased significantly. To receive a green performance level, an LEA school or student group would need one of the following combinations: a status of very high with a change of declined significantly or declined, a status of high with a change of declined significantly, declined, maintained, increased, or a status level of medium with a change of increased or increased significantly. To receive a yellow performance level, an LEA school or student group would need one of the following combinations: the status of medium with a change of declined significantly, declined, or maintained, or a status level of low with a change of increased or increased significantly. To receive an orange performance level, an LEA school or student group would need one of the following combinations: status of low with a change of declined significantly, declined, or maintained, or a status of very low with a change of increased or increased significantly. Finally, an LEA or school or student group would receive a red performance level with a status of very low and a change level of either declined significantly, declined, or maintained. The academic indicator does not have a 3x5 methodology applied for small populations. Each category for status and change is established through setting cut scores. The academic indicators have two different sets of cut scores for each subject. One applies to high school and high school districts, while the other applies to all other schools and LEA types. This includes elementary, middle, kindergarten through grade 12, or any others not labeled as high school. Beginning with the 2022 dashboard, the Dashboard Alternative School Status, also known as DAS, specific cut scores are no longer applied to the dashboard. DAS schools have the same cut scores applied as the other schools with their school type. The final DFS with participation rules applied will be used to determine the status as well as the status level for the dashboard. The cut scores for the academic indicators can be accessed on the CDE status cut scores for the 2023 dashboard webpage, which is included in the note-taking guide. Based on California's Every Student Succeeds Act or ESSA state plan, schools that only serve kindergarten, grade 1, and or grade 2, the non-testing grades, are required to receive a performance level on the academic indicator, even though students in these grades are not administered the ELA or mathematics assessments. The process of assigning DFS results to these schools is called pair and share. These schools are specifically assigned grade 3 DFS, which includes results from both the Smarter Balance summative assessments and the CAAs from the district, county, or up to 3 schools to which their students matriculate. Pair and share DFS is only reported for the all student level. No additional student groups are reported. Next, we'd like to cover some of the additional academic measures for consideration. That is, measures that are not yet included on the dashboard, but are being considered for future inclusion. First is the California Science Test, or CAST. The CAST is a summative assessment subject test that is administered for all students in grade 5 and 8 and one time in high school. So just one time in grade 10, 11, or 12. The CAST is not a state indicator on the dashboard. However, a link to the CAST results will be available on the Additional Reports webpage, just as it was in 2022. Next is the California Growth Model. Since 2015, California has invested significant time and effort in developing a student-level growth model that is valid, reliable, and fair. The growth model is currently not included as a part of the academic indicator on the dashboard. However, results of the growth model are scheduled to be released in late 2024. So that covers the general information about the academic indicators on the 2023 dashboard. Katrina will now go over how we include participation rate into the overall performance of LEAs, schools, and student groups.
Thank you, Michael. Now, there are a few things that affect the final DFS for a school or district. One of the biggest factors is the participation rate. Under the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA, states must test at least 95% of their students. This requirement is applied for all schools, LEAs, and student groups and are calculated separately for each group. If they do not meet this target, California must assign the lowest obtainable scale score, or the loss, to each missing student that is needed to bring the participation rate of the school, district, and/or student group up to 95%. For ELA, the loss score is negative 333, or 333 points below standard. For mathematics, the assigned loss is negative 348, or 348 points below standard. The loss is assigned to the number of students needed to bring the participation rate up to 95% and will be used in calculating the average DFS. In order to calculate the participation rate, we apply the participation rate formula, where the numerator is the number of students tested, which is divided by the denominator, the number of students enrolled during the accountability testing window. In order for a student to count as tested, they must log on to both the Computer Adaptive Test, the CAT, and the Performance Task portions, the PT portion of the assessment. The student does not need to complete the entire assessment. However, their scores will be included in the average DFS calculation, even if it isn't reflective of the score they would have achieved if they had finished the assessments. If not enough questions were answered and there's no score generated, an assigned loss, lowest obtainable skill score for their grade level will be applied. The denominator represents those students enrolled during the accountability testing window. Many rules are applied to determine if a student is considered enrolled at the school or LEA. Keep in mind that the participation rate rules and denominator will be different from those used to calculate the average DFS. For more information about the participation rate, please visit the link to the participation rate flyer provided in the note-taking guide. There are a few exemptions for special cases, such as medical emergencies and newly enrolled EL students who take the ELA assessment, where these students are not expected to test. Students who miss school due to an illness without a medical emergency flag or have a parent opt them out of testing are still included in the participation rate denominator. There are grace windows applied for students entering or exiting the school during the testing window, applied according to the length of the LEA selected testing window. Determining a school's accountability testing window is one of the first steps taken to finalize the participation rate denominator. Although LEAs set their own testing window for the Smarter Balance summative assessments and CAAs in the TOMS Test Administration Setup module, for dashboard accountability purposes, the CDE determines what is called an accountability testing window for each school and LEA. The accountability testing window for the dashboard starts when the first student at the school takes the test. Depending on the length of the LEA selected testing window, grace periods may be applied as well. Grace periods were developed to apply to certain students who transfer in and out of the school during the testing start and end dates and are holding schools harmless on the accountability measures when there is inadequate time to administer the assessments. They are applied before and after the accountability testing window according to the length of the LEA selected test window. If the LEA selected test window is 14 days or less, there is no grace period applied. If the LEA selected testing window is between 15 and 30 days, one grace period is applied at the end of the window. Students enrolling in the school during the grace period at the end of the testing window are not expected to test. If the LEA selected testing window is 31 or more days, 2 grace periods are applied. One grace period is applied at the beginning of the window for students exiting the school at the beginning of the window, and one grace period is at the end of the window for students enrolling in the school at the end of the testing window. For some LEAs, many students are entering or exiting their school during the testing window, and it can be very difficult to determine which students should or should not be tested. For accountability purposes, we've simplified this participation rate a bit, hopefully to clarify any confusion. Students that transfer in or out of a school are expected to test if they are enrolled for at least one day during the accountability testing window. The California School Dashboard reports data on how local education agencies and schools are meeting the needs of California's diverse student populations. For most student groups, the LEA in which a student resides will be the same LEA in which the student is receiving the majority of their instruction. However, students with disabilities often receive services outside of their district of special education or their DSEA. The DSEA, which in most cases is also the district of geographic residence, may be unable to provide the full range of special education services that a student requires and will often enter into a memorandum of understanding, or MOU, with another LEA or County Office of Education to provide these services. As a reminder, the District of Special Education Accountability, or DSEA, is only calculated at the LEA level. Students with disabilities may be included in the denominator of a district other than their tested district if they have a DSEA listed in CalPADS under the special education file. Students are expected to test at the school they are attending and will be included in the denominator of the school where they are expected to test, since DSEA only applies at the LEA level. Before we close out a review of the academic indicators, we wanted to review a few frequently asked questions, or FAQs, that we've received. Will we be resetting DFS cut scores for the 2023 dashboard? No, there were no changes made to either the status or the cut scores for the academic indicators on the 2023 dashboard. Will the California growth model replace status for the academic indicators? No. At this time, growth data are not a part of the academic indicators. Action would need to be taken by the State Board of Education to add growth scores to the academic indicator or change any current academic indicators on the California School Dashboard. However, CDE will publicly release growth data in 2024. Why are the CASP reports not matching the results of the dashboard? The CASP reporting webpage and the dashboard are reporting results from the spring summative CASP testing. However, they do have a number of differences and often will not match. The CASP reports most student demographics based on data at the close of the testing window. However, the dashboard looks at systemic student demographics based on CalPADS end-of-year submissions. The CASP results are based on achievement levels and includes all tested students. The dashboard results are based on a combination of participation rate and distance from standard, and we may remove students' test scores due to the business rules applied. The CASP webpage reports those taking the alternative assessments separately from those taking the Smarter Balance assessments, while the dashboard combines these results into one average distance from standard. The CASP results reports the number of students tested, while the dashboard student scores are included only for those continuously enrolled as previously stated. And finally, the District of Residence rules are applied to LEAs, which is unique to the dashboard. If my newcomer EL student took an ELA test on accident, will it still be used in my DFS calculation? EL students who have been enrolled in a U.S. school for less than 1 year are exempt from taking the ELA portion of the Smarter Balance summative assessments and the CAA. For accountability purposes, any EL newcomer who is enrolled in the U.S. after April 15th, 2022 will automatically be removed from the calculation of the ELA participation rate, even if the student opted to take one or both parts of the ELA assessment. These students will not be included in the participation rate or DFS calculations. I'm going to pass it over to Michael to cover the remaining FAQs. So take it away, Michael.
Thank you. For our next question, a student left my school before the testing window opened, but they are still not showing up in the testing operations management system, also known as TOMS. Will this affect my participation rate? Many of our LEAs want to track their participation rate in real time with the goal of testing 100% of their students. The only tool that LEAs have to track their testing is through the TOMS completion reports. Unfortunately, these reports are not the same as the participation rate reports. TOMS is a great tool for looking at real-time testing rates within a school or LEA. However, the dashboard does not use the same inclusion-exclusion rules for the participation rate calculation. The CDE does not actually receive the testing data until the fall, after the testing has been completed, and LEAs cannot do anything to increase their testing rates. To answer the question more directly, students remain in TOMS at their last known CalPADS school. Therefore, if a student never enrolled in another California school, they will appear as needing to test in TOMS. Since these students left before the testing window opened, they will not be included in the numerator or denominator of the participation rate on the dashboard. A student left in the middle of testing but did not start any of the assessments. Will I be held accountable for their test? If a student is expected to test and did not test, the school and LEA will be held accountable for their student not testing. If the student falls under any of the exemptions, including grace periods, and is not expected to test, the student and LEA will not be held accountable for the student not testing. A student left my school during the LEA selected testing window, but before we tested any students. Will they affect my participation rate? No, a student that exits the school before testing has begun are not expected to test and will not be included in either the numerator or the denominator of the participation rate. And finally, the last question we'll cover today. My school did not reach 95% participation on CAST. What will happen? At this time, the science test is not included as a measure on the academic indicator. While we encourage full participation on the test, reaching less than 95% for the science test has no impact on accountability. For more FAQs that are available at the Academic Indicator webpage and will be updated as we receive more questions from the field. This was our quick recap of the academic indicators. If you need additional help with the academic indicators, we have a few different resources available for you. All links are in the note-taking guide. First, we have our California Department of Education Academic Indicator webpage. This will be your go-to for any questions you might have about how rules are applied or examples. It contains links to everything technical and simplified, including a link to our technical guide. And starting in 2022, the technical guide had been broken up into mini guides to make the information more digestible. There's an entire mini guide dedicated to all things academic indicator, including participation rate, DFS, and how to get a color on the dashboard. Next, we have the additional reports webpage. After the dashboard has been publicly released, the data will be uploaded for the 2023 dashboard. The academic indicator data reports will give you more information that is not available in the dashboard. This additional information can be found in the in the ELA report, the math report, and the participation rate report. That is a lot of important information about the academic indicators. I will pass it back to Katrina to cover general rules about the dashboard.
Thank you, Michael. Our final topic today will be to walk through some general rules about the dashboard. We want to go through what the accountability N-size thresholds are and how they will be displayed for the 2023 dashboard. We'll use the academic indicator results for our example. If the N-size is 30 or more students in the denominator, then the performance level or color is reported on the dashboard along with the status and change from the prior year. There's an option to select the student group or compare it to the state student group results. In the first sample card shown, the Hispanic student group is selected and displays a green performance level or color with the gauge pointing to the green color and the green along the top border. The card shows a distance from standard or DFS of 3.5 points above standard and a change of maintained 1 point from the prior year. The number of students or N-size is 58. Any LEA school or student group with more than 30 students in the denominator is held accountable for differentiated assistance or DA at the LEA level and comprehensive support and improvement CSI, additional targeted support and improvement ATSI at the school level. If the N-size on the dashboard is between 11 to 29 students in the denominator, then only the distance from standard and change from the prior year is reported. In this sample card, 2 or more races student group is selected and displays no performance color with a grayed out gauge and a DFS of 31.2 points above standard. It also reports a decline of 4.7 points from the year prior. The number of students or N-size is 23. There's an option to select the student group or compare it to the state student group results. Any LEA school or student group with 11 to 29 students in the denominator is not held accountable for DA at the LEA level or CSI, ATSI at the school level. The dashboard for less than 11 students is very limited in information. If the N-size is less than 11 students in the denominator, then no data are reported on the dashboard to protect student privacy. In this final sample card, the homeless student group is selected and displays no performance level, a grayed out gauge, and no data on the distance from standard. The number of students or N-size is only 8. Similar to the other cards, there's an option to select the student group or compare it to the state student group results. Any LEA school or student group with less than 11 students in the denominator is not held accountable for DA at the LEA level or CSI, ATSI at the school level. There are, however, N-size threshold exceptions to the rules that I just explained. They apply to the foster youth and homeless student groups, as their N-size thresholds are different at the LEA and school levels. At the district or LEA level, there must be 15 or more students in the denominator to be reported on the dashboard and held accountable. At the school level, there must be 30 or more students in the denominator to be reported on the dashboard and held accountable. For these exceptions, charter schools are treated as schools, not as LEAs. Therefore, Charter schools will need 30 or more students in the denominator for foster youth and/or homeless student groups to be held accountable. Next, the District of Special Education Accountability, or DSEA. We've already talked about this specifically for the academic indicator, but this rule is also applied to other indicators on the dashboard. The DSEA rule is applied to all available state indicators for SWDs, or students with disabilities, who receive special education services at another district or county office of education. These student score results will be sent back to the District of Residence, or DSEA, and included in the DSEA's dashboard. For example, the district where a student geographically resides is held accountable for a student's graduation outcomes, and that data is included in the District of Residence's graduation rate indicator. Please note that this rule applies to LEAs only. All schools, including charter schools, are held accountable for all students with disabilities. This rule has been applied since 2017 for the academic indicators, and the 2020 reporting of the graduation rate and CCI data on the CDE School Dashboard Additional Reports website. It was applied for all indicators starting on the 2022 dashboard and will continue for the 2023 dashboard and beyond. For more information, refer to the District of Residence Rule Flyer, which is coming in October of 2023, under the Additional Flyers and Information section on the CDE Dashboard Communications Toolkit webpage. The webpage is found in your note-taking guide. Next, we want to clarify a rule about charter schools that is unique to the dashboard. Since charter schools are treated as LEAs under the Local Control Funding Formula, or LCFF, their data are not included in the authoriser's dashboard report. This includes both direct and locally funded charter schools. If these extra resources and general rules about the dashboard do not answer your remaining questions, as always, we can be contacted anytime and are just an email away. As a reminder, our email is dashboard@cde.ca.gov. We also invite you to follow us on X, which is formerly Twitter. Our username is @CDE-dashboard. Thank you for watching this on-demand video about the academic indicators. Again, please contact us if you have any additional questions. Thank you.